Hey everybody, how are you? How are you?
I'm doing great.
Good. Yeah, I hope everybody's doing well. I know what day it is today. It's Thursday. Some days it's harder to figure out where I am.
Like, I didn't
than
know that.
others.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
So we are live. It's 4:30. You're here live with me cooking, and we are going to cook a fish dish that has a really interesting backstory, not only the dish itself, but where the ingredients came from, which we'll talk about in a minute. But this is a Brazilian fish stew called moqueca. And it's a dish that I learned from Milk Street, who I've talked about a lot, and it's from one of their classes called Fearless Fish, which when we put it up on the schedule, it sold out like that with a waiting list. So it's obviously a pain point for a lot of folks cooking fish, which is interesting in this part of the country because we're not landlocked. We have beautiful Louisiana seafood industry, but still a lot of people have questions about fish and concerns about fish. So I hope I can clear some of that up. And for any of you all who thought, what is this dish she's talking about? Trust me, it's not that far off from something we grew up with in South Louisiana. So let me tell you where we're at right now. What we've got in this pan is sauteing, sweating, not getting much browning at all, a thinly sliced onion and a thinly sliced bell pepper. I had half a yellow bell pepper and half a red pepper. I don't know why. Maybe makshu? Anyway, that's what I had, so that's what's in there, along with a sliced jalapeno. Traditionally, it would be a serrano. We couldn't find serrano, so it's jalapeno, which is perfectly fine. In Brazil, they would use palm oil, and palm oil has a very brick red, distinct color. Okay. So we're going to get to that color with tomatoes and paprika. If you have palm oil, use it, but it's not a deal breaker here. So those have been sweating. We've got them nice and soft, and now what she's going to go in with is a can of tomatoes, a good heaping teaspoon of paprika. I'm just using sweet smoked paprika. You could totally use hot paprika if you wanted to. So she's going to go in with that. And she's going to need water here in a minute, so I'm just going to give her half a can of water. She's going in with paprika, tomatoes, and garlic, and we're going to get that bubbling and ready for our next step. So I want to talk a little bit about what this dish is similar to that we may have grown up with, but I want to show you first what we've done with the fish. So Alana brought me this fish. She brought me a big seal meal bag of frozen fish and a seal meal bag of blueberries, which if you know me, you know that that kind of stuff makes me so happy that we are bringing things back and forth. And I did bring you eggs, but yes, my mother would always reciprocate if someone brought her something like that. Then days later they would be like a loaf of banana bread or something like that. Yeah. So immediately I was like, oh, I have to reciprocate. But that fish is absolutely gorgeous. It's here in this pan. Tell us about the fish. Who caught the fish?
So my dad caught the fish. He loves going fishing in Pointe-aux-Chenes, which is almost as far south Louisiana as you can get, almost. This is a bull red, which is a redfish, but it's a redfish that reaches 27 inches or larger. So it gets a little bit meatier and a little bit fattier almost too.
So in Brazil, they would actually use cod, which is a meaty, fish. So this is actually a perfect local sub-in. Another one I would use would be drum.
Yeah.
In a second, I would drop drum in this.
Which we get in Pointe-aux-Chenes also all the time.
Right. But that leads me to the dish that this is similar to, which is redfish coubillon, which it looks like court bouillon when you spell it, but I grew up eating coubillon. And that is one of my husband's favorite dishes.
I love it.
And I remember as an adult wrapping my head around it. I had this thing in my brain about Cajun Creole food having to simmer for a really long time. And the liquid, the poaching liquid that the redfish goes in does simmer for a little while. It starts with a roux.
Right.
And it does simmer for a little while, but the fish does not. The fish poaches right at the end, which is exactly what's going to happen here. So very similar to what's happening in Brazil, in redfish coubillon is what's happening in this moqueca. Yep. So just a different flavor profile. But the bottom line is when you're poaching fish or seafood, and we are going to add shrimp to this, a pound of peeled deveined shrimp. When you're poaching seafood, you need a very flavorful liquid.
Yeah.
So I'm going to write some of those on the board up here in just a second. But I want to talk about what I did with the fish. So I cut the fish in small pieces because it was such a large fillet.
Yeah.
When I trimmed it and I cut it, it kind of turned into square fish, which is a little bit of a joke. But beautiful, meaty pieces of fish with tons of garlic on top. And this has been happening for 15 minutes in this pan. Garlic, lime zest, lime juice, salt and pepper. So a little bit of a marinade that would, not enough acid in there to lead completely to a ceviche, but that's what's happening here, the acid going to work on that fish to bring it flavor and tenderness, and then tons of garlic. So that's bubbling away. Now we need our liquids in this poaching liquid. So that's where we have water, coconut milk, and a bottle of clam juice. So the clam juice is there because it is a concentrated amount of an amazingly flavorful liquid. So if that's not available to you, not a lot of us have a bottle of clam juice in our cabinet. You could certainly get there with a seafood stock if you had a base, you know, it's sort of like a paste, the base that you make stock with.
Right.
That would be a great stand-in, but you can make a quick stock, especially if these shrimp had peels. You can make a quick concentrated stock with the tails and peels and heads of shrimp. And so you would just do, this is just 8 ounces. So I'm talking about a cup of water with all those shrimp peels would make a really, really concentrated stock. And that would get you to this very flavorful liquid. So this is a poach. This is going to end up being a soupy stew in the plate when you plate it. But that is absolutely gorgeous in color, and we need that to get to a simmer. And I'm going to drop a little bit of salt in there. So we need to get that to a simmer, and then we're going to drop our fish and shrimp in. And once you drop the fish and shrimp in, you definitely need a barely simmering liquid. So when we're talking about poaching, it's not a heavy simmer or a generous simmer, or especially not a boil. We're talking about what I would call a lazy bubble.
Yeah.
So we are poaching. So a poach is barely simmering. And my favorite thing to say is lazy bubble. Okay, so we've got Cajun Creole. Y'all, my cat Buster's coming in. So that would have traditionally been redfish coubillon.
Yeah.
If we had redfish, you know what my mom would have used? Catfish. Because we always had catfish.
Right.
So we've got, it looks like court bouillon. But that is so redfish would be traditional. And that would be roux plus aromatics plus liquid, and it's usually a tomato liquid. And then fish, we would drop shrimp, or if we had crawfish tails, we would drop crawfish tails. So then this word is, we say coubillon here, and I'm going to say court bouillon, but probably neither is correct. But court bouillon, from a traditional culinary sense, is stock, wine, aromatics, herbs to make a very flavorful liquid that would then be used to make a dish called bouillabaisse.
Yep.
So bouillabaisse is another fish stew. So that's a brothy fish stew. That's our rice timer. That's a broth.
Okay, we're back.
Are we back?
Yeah.
Could be all sorts of seafood in there. And that lazy bubble is happening, so let's drop fish and shrimp. All right, I'm gonna get our shrimp in there. And she's gonna place those pieces of fish and make sure that if they should be covered with the liquid, or all, as covered as possible. And you could always do a little bit of turning here and there to make sure they're submerged, but I think they're going to be submerged. And you can also, literally, if you think about, basting an egg, you could do some spooning of the liquid over that, and all that liquid goes in. So that marinating liquid, that lime juice, that lime and the garlic, all goes in there. And then we want to play with our heat a little bit to make sure we see a lazy bubble. But all of that's going to poach very, very gently. And then you'll have this beautiful brothy liquid with this seafood in a bowl. And we made some lovely coconut rice. All right, so bouillabaisse would be what that traditional French court bouillon liquid would be used for. We have moqueca, which is what we're making today. That's another fish stew that gets poached. So Mouqueck, super fun to say. And that's Brazil. This is France. This is Louisiana. And then, so then another way to do this same thing, think about a flavorful liquid, and you poach the seafood right at the end. You can do that in a curry.
Yeah.
So a more liquidy curry, you know, whether you do Thai curry that's red with coconut milk and lemongrass,
It's
or
not too far off from.
it's not.
Yeah.
So this isn't like wild and crazy. What is she talking about? These are things that we know. They're just using the ingredients that are, so curry is going to be not only India, we're talking about Thailand, we're talking about
It could be Cuba.
Trinidad,
Yeah.
Cuba. You know, a curry is not just India, but let me put any lips. So lots of places. But these are all ways that you're going to get to this fish stew, which isn't the sexiest name for this dish. Let's face it. How about some fish stew, everybody? These sound a whole lot better, and this is all, you're there. You have this in your kitchen. If you have stock, if you have coconut milk, if you have herbs, aromatics, I mean, your spices are definitely going to get you there. Cans of tomato.
Yeah. Even just heavy cream. Too,
Yeah,
as a
yeah.
replacement,
And the big thing right now is butter poaching fish.
which is delicious.
So yeah, so butter poached salmon, something like that. So this is all available to you. It's just all about understanding where aromatics and other flavors get used, and in one kind of specific situation, that roux that we do
Yeah.
at the beginning for this dish, that does definitely give it a different, you know, mouthfeel and more of that rice and gravy kind of situation. But you're there. If you have frozen fish in the freezer, if you're swapping with your neighbors, you know, this would be a great Lenten dish for tomorrow. Okay, we wanted to make you guys dessert. So Alana is going to make something that's very, very special to her. She's going to go grab it from the oven because we made one in advance. But she's going to make something very, very special to her. And we're using those blueberries that she brought to me last week. A big zip bag of blueberries, and she is going to make what she calls, I've never heard it referred to as this before, but she calls it a creeping cobbler.
Cobbler, yeah.
So tell us what we did first with that hot pan that's right in front of you.
So in the pan is a half a stick of butter, oven temp.
I did 350.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
normally standard.
Yeah.
So 350 degrees, half a stick of butter goes in the bottom of your pan first, and then you go in the oven to get it just melted.
Mm-hmm.
You could even take it further and brown it, which would be delicious
Yeah,
also.
for sure.
In this bowl is all of our dry ingredients. It's all-purpose flour, just regular sugar, and then a tablespoon of baking powder. You could just use self-rising flour and sugar too,
Yeah.
which would be another good substitute.
Yeah. I don't usually have self-rising flour on hand,
either.
but I know a lot of folks do, but that
Yeah.
would definitely get you there.
So in our dry ingredients, I'm gonna put in, it's a cup of flour, a cup of sugar, a cup of milk. My pawpaw used to call it a cup, creeping cobbler. So just so you can know ratios. So in our cup of milk is also a teaspoon of vanilla extract. So that all goes in combined together. We're gonna give that a mix.
Do you have your blueberries?
I got them right
Okay.
here. I did eyeball the blueberries, but you probably want about a cup and a half to 2 cups. It could be either frozen, it could be fresh, or even just a really good preserve if you have them too.
Right.
And it doesn't have to be blueberries either.
Right.
Yeah.
So if you use a pie filling from a can or canned fruit, it usually has sugar in it, pectin and maybe sugar in it.
Yeah.
So just know that it's going to be delicious, but it's going to be,
Kind of like a gooey
yeah, but sweeter too.
and sweeter, yeah.
And fresh versus frozen, all that really does is changes the cook time.
Yeah.
You know, it doesn't really change the whether, you know, the taste or anything like that. It's still, that fruit still gets jammy underneath that batter as it creeps up over the fruit.
Yep. So, unlike a traditional cobbler, the creeping cobbler, the batter has to go on the bottom first.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to go ahead and pour that into our melted butter. I'm going to scrape up all these little bits.
Holy cow, that looks amazing.
Alright, and then our blueberries go on top. Alright,
Gorgeous.
and that's all it is to it. And then we bake it for 20-ish minutes.
Yeah, yeah.
About.
So, yeah, we've got one pre-made, and somebody lucky is going home with that one. But it browned up beautifully, and that would be delicious with ice cream or gelato or something like
Yeah,
that.
heavy whipping cream even. It's
Okay.
really tasty.
So I'm going to have you chop some cilantro for our moqueca, and so that we can plate that. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the rice that we made, because this is my favorite approach to rice, or really any grain. I do this with farro, I do this with quinoa, bulgur, barley, all of them. It brings just great flavor into a pot of some grains. So let me grab this. I'm not gonna burn myself. Okay, so we used coconut milk as our liquid for making this rice, but what happened in this pot is when the rice was raw, we sauteed the raw rice in fat and aromatics. So I just used a spice blend. You could use granulated onion, garlic, salt, and pepper. You could use finely chopped onion, celery, but just something flavorful, some aromatics. And then we sauteed that raw rice in those aromatics and with some fat until the rice got shiny and it was glistening with the fat, and we could smell it kind of getting nutty.
Yeah.
You don't really need to brown it or pop it or anything like that. And then we went in with our liquid, our 2-to-1 ratio of liquid, just as we always do, and it just transforms a grain with that one really simple step. Okay, so that is gorgeous, and we are going to serve up this dish.
Should I grab a bowl?
I thought I had bowls. So 2 little shallow bowls over here. Yeah. Let's see how we did. So it smells amazing. It is
It's a beautiful
the most
color.
beautiful color. So I'm going to do a little rice right here on the side, and then spoon us in some of this. And the vegetables are beautiful. The shrimp is pink and firm, and the fish looks fantastic. This is this flavor profile, all of what's happening in here. Well, minus the shellfish because she's allergic, but definitely the fish. This is my sister. This lime,
Nice.
coconut, cilantro, that whole flavor profile, that's all her. That is gorgeous.
It's beautiful.
All right, shall we get spoons?
Yes. Would you like some cilantro on yours?
Please. I'm team cilantro.
Me too.
All right, we've got rice. Big spoonful of vegetables. That fish goes in.
Right behind you.
And I want to hear what fish you guys used to make this, what braising liquid you decided to go with, whether or not you went with this Brazilian moqueca, or if you made a curry, or if you made a bouillabaisse, because it's all available to us probably in our pantry right now. All right, let's see how we did. Look at the color on that. It's like fluorescent, Reagan. It's crazy. All right, let's see.
I can see the steam coming off.
Oh, it's so good. It's sweet. Oh man, the clam juice.
I get the lime, the zest. Really,
Yeah.
it's so nice in there.
Oh, and the garlic. It's really, really beautiful, you guys. This is, how fast did we do that too? 20 minutes?
20 minutes.
Yeah. Yeah. So, pot of rice is 20 minutes and the moqueca is 20 minutes.
So put
You
your
can't-
rice on and
Yeah,
time it
you
right.
can't beat that. And this is not throw together a Tuesday night supper. I would serve this to guests. Not yet. When we're back at it, I would definitely serve this to guests. This is
Yeah.
beautiful. Great job.
Awesome.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you. Thanks, guys. I will be back next week. See you guys then. Thanks.